In June 2011, two Swedish treasure hunters were dragging a sonar array across the floor of the Gulf of Bothnia, not looking for ruins, not looking for history, just looking for something worth selling. Peter Lindberg and Denise Asberg ran Ocean X Team, a commercial salvage operation based in Stockholm. They had done this hundreds of times before. The sonar cable trailing behind their vessel, the seafloor returns scrolling across the screen in green and gray. The Gulf of Bothnia sits between Sweden and Finland. The water is cold, the visibility poor, the depth in that area around 80 to 90 meters. It is not glamorous diving territory.
What appeared on their screen that afternoon would turn a standard commercial salvage sweep into one of the most debated sonar images in modern maritime history.
The sonar image showed a circle 60 meters across, sitting at 87 meters depth, with edges that were almost perfectly round. That alone was unusual. Seafloor geology is irregular. Rock formations scatter, sediment drifts, glacial deposits fan out in asymmetric patterns. A clean circle 60 meters across is not what the ocean floor typically produces. But the circle was not the only thing. Leading directly to it, a straight line, 300 meters long, running across the seafloor, as if something had been dragged to that exact position and stopped. Lindberg compared the image to the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. He was joking. The international press was not. Within days, the image was on every major news platform in the world. Alien spacecraft, ancient temple, crashed Nazi weapon. The theories arrived faster than the facts. A second expedition was planned for the following year, but the 2012 dive would not settle anything. It would make the questions harder. When the Ocean X Team divers reached the object in 2012, they reported surfaces that did not match what they expected from a natural glacial deposit. Flat vertical faces, right-angle corners, a layer of black soot-like material coating the top of the structure, and a series of small, egg-shaped holes or indentations distributed across the surface. Natural rock formations do have flat faces. Glacial grinding can produce right angles. Volcanic material can produce dark deposits. None of these observations, individually, ruled out a geological explanation. But the team reported something else, something that has never been independently confirmed. Within approximately 200 meters of the object, electronic equipment began to malfunction. Satellite phones cut out. Camera systems failed and had to be restarted. The team's underwater lighting equipment showed erratic behavior. They reported this on camera. They reported it in their logs. No independent research team has ever been in a position to replicate or contradict that claim, because no independent research team has dived the site. Every piece of evidence from the Baltic Sea Anomaly comes from one source. That is not a conspiracy. It is simply a fact that determines how much weight the evidence can carry. Volker Bruchert of Stockholm University examined samples that Ocean X Team provided from the site. His conclusion was direct. The material was consistent with a glacial deposit from the last ice age, approximately 10,000 years old, formed by the retreat of the Scandinavian ice sheet. He did not say the object was ordinary. He said the material he had examined had a geological explanation. But Ocean X Team had not given him everything. The sample set they provided was partial. A full independent analysis, a systematic collection of material from multiple points across the formation, was never conducted because Ocean X team declined to make that possible. Bruchert's assessment was published in press statements, not in a peer-reviewed journal. It was a qualified professional opinion based on incomplete data. The scientific conclusion was therefore exactly as unresolved as the sonar image. One geologist, partial samples, a provisional finding. The object remained at 87 meters. The debate remained on the surface. The geological explanation runs as follows. When the Scandinavian ice sheet retreated 10,000 years ago, glaciers dragged rock across the Baltic floor, depositing material in formations that can include circular shapes. The 300-meter line leading to the object, that could be a glacial striation, scored into the seafloor by moving ice, not by a sliding craft. The flat faces and right-angle corners, glacial rock fractures along crystalline plains. Flat surfaces are not impossible. They are unusual, but not impossible. Glaciers can produce circular formations, but the combination of a 60-meter diameter, geometric regularity at that scale, a direct 300-meter approach line, and the right-angle corner reports has no clean parallel in documented glacial geology. Therefore, even geologists who accept the natural formation theory have noted that this particular combination of features is not standard. As for the electronics interference, there is no scientific framework in which a rock formation on the seafloor would disrupt satellite communications at the surface. That claim has no physical mechanism behind it. It may be accurate, it may be a misattribution. Without independent observation, it cannot be evaluated. As of today, no independent scientific team has dived the Baltic Sea Anomaly. The object sits at 87 meters, accessible by standard commercial diving equipment, well within the range of research institutions across Scandinavia and Northern Europe. The samples that could resolve the debate exist. They are in Ocean X team's possession. They have not been made available for independent peer review. The sonar image, 60 meters across, perfectly circular, 300 meters of approach line, remains the primary evidence. Whether it is a glacial deposit, a geological anomaly, or something that has no current explanation, nobody outside the Ocean X team has been permitted to determine. The Baltic keeps its object, 87 meters down, waiting for a question that has not yet been asked by the right people with the right instruments, without a commercial interest in the answer. The Baltic object had no voice, no distress call, no final transmission, just a shape on a sonar screen that nobody could fully explain. But some maritime mysteries arrive with words attached. Final messages that reached the surface, were recorded in logbooks, and still make no sense. In April 1925, a Japanese cargo ship sent one last radio transmission before it went under. The message was 7 words long. Those 7 words have never been satisfactorily explained. The Raifuku Maru was a Japanese cargo vessel working a standard Atlantic crossing in April 1925, northbound, somewhere in the waters north of the Bahamas. She was not a famous ship. She was not on a notable route. She was carrying commercial cargo across the Atlantic in spring weather, running a course that Japanese merchant vessels had run hundreds of times before. Nothing about the Raifuku Maru suggested she would become the subject of a mystery that would still be discussed a century later. It was the kind of crossing that left no record, a departure log, a cargo manifest, an expected arrival date. Until the moment it sent its last signal, the Raifuku Maru was simply a ship doing what ships do. Then the radio room sent a message, and the message made no sense. The distress signal was picked up by the RMS Homeric, a White Star Line passenger ship running a parallel course and within radio range.
The Homeric's radio operator received the transmission. It was in distress format, that much was clear, but the content, translated into English, produced something that defied easy interpretation.
7 words. Danger like dagger now. Come quick.
The operator transcribed it. The captain was notified. The Homeric changed course and moved at full speed toward the signal's origin. Standard maritime rescue protocol. Executed immediately. But those 7 words stayed in the log. Danger like dagger. Not danger from storm, not danger from flooding, not engine failure or fire or collision, the standard vocabulary of maritime distress. A dagger. The Homeric would arrive. The crew would see what was happening, but the Homeric's arrival would answer nothing about why it was happening.
The Raifuku Maru had already told the world everything it was going to say.
When the Homeric reached the position, the Raifuku Maru was already going under. The Homeric's crew stood on deck and watched. There was nothing to do but watch. The Japanese cargo ship was capsizing in heavy swells, rolling past the point of recovery, the angle increasing beyond any possibility of righting herself. No boats had been launched successfully. The crew was visible on deck, men holding on, moving, then swept away as the ship's angle became impossible. The Homeric's captain recorded what he saw in his log. The sinking, the crew, the sea state, the time. Every man aboard the Raifuku Maru was lost, the full complement. Not one survivor was recovered. The Homeric crew watched it happen. They were the only witnesses. And what they saw was the end, not the beginning. Not the cause, not whatever it was that had made the radio operator reach for the key and send those 7 words before everything else stopped. The phrase "danger like dagger" has been analyzed for 100 years. The original Japanese distress phrasing from the Raifuku Maru's radio room was not preserved. What reached the Homeric's operator came through in the context of a vessel in extremis, transmitted by a man who may or may not have spoken English as a primary language, received and transcribed under pressure. The translation may have been accurate. It may have been a rendering that captured the urgency but distorted the specific meaning. The original Japanese text, if it was Japanese, was never recovered. Was danger like dagger a structural metaphor? A shard of something embedded in the hull? A reading on an instrument that had gone beyond a danger threshold? A needle pushed past a marked limit, like a blade's edge? Or was it simply a translation error? A rendering that made a mundane SOS sound poetic and inexplicable, when the original meaning was water flooding fast, or listing badly, or engine room on fire? Did the radio operator on the Raifuku Maru, with seconds or minutes left, find exactly the right words for something that had no name? Or did he find the wrong words, and leave a mystery where there was none. The most straightforward explanation is weather. April squalls in the northern Bahamas region are sudden, severe, and capable of generating the kind of breaking seas that can overwhelm a heavily laden cargo vessel without warning. An aging hull under a full cargo load in a confused sea is a credible casualty scenario that requires no additional explanation. Lloyd's of London Casualty Returns listed the loss of the Raifuku Maru without extraordinary notation. A maritime casualty. Sea conditions. End of record. The Bermuda Triangle designation applied to this area came later. Charles Berlitz and others added the geographic mythology to the loss in the 1970s, long after the fact. Lloyd's did not find the location mysterious. They found it fatal. But the Homeric's log noted that the swells were heavy when they arrived, not catastrophic, not the kind of sea state that instantly explains a rapid capsizing with no boat launched. Why did a ship that was still transmitting radio messages go under so fast that no one on board could reach the lifeboats? The weather theory fits most of the facts. It does not fit all of them. And the 7 words, sitting in the Homeric's log, unchanged for a century, have never found a satisfactory home in any explanation. The Raifuku Maru went down with witnesses watching from the deck of the Homeric, and still no one could say what had happened. But at least there had been witnesses. At least there had been a final message. The case that follows left nothing behind. No signal, no survivors, no wreckage large enough to explain what happened to a Royal Navy warship and 52 men, in waters that, as it turned out, had already swallowed 3 other British ships. On September 22, 1887, the Royal Navy gunboat HMS Wasp was operating off the northwest coast of Ireland, near Tory Island. Tory Island sits 9 miles off the Donegal coast, one of the most isolated inhabited communities in Ireland, separated from the mainland by water that is frequently impassable in autumn. The waters around it are not deep, but they are difficult. Currents change. Rock formations sit close to the surface in places that charts of that era did not fully document. The Wasp was assigned to administrative duties in those waters, the kind of routine patrol work that fills a naval log without drama. The Wasp had sailed these waters before. It would not sail them again. On September 22nd, the gunboat went out. The sea closed behind it. 52 men did not come home. The Royal Navy would spend months looking for an explanation, and would not find one. The Wasp simply did not return. There was no distress signal. No SOS reached any station. No ship reported a visual contact with the gunboat in distress. No witness watched it go under the way the Homeric's crew had watched the Raifuku Maru. What washed ashore in the days afterward was not enough. Scattered pieces of wreckage, a quantity and distribution that could not be reverse engineered into a cause. Not enough to say she struck rock here, at this angle. Not enough to say she capsized at this point in a sea of this height. There were no bodies recovered at the site. 52 men. Some wreckage. No mechanism. The Admiralty opened an inquiry. The inquiry examined what was available. What was available was almost nothing. The file was opened with very little evidence. It would be closed in the same condition. The Admiralty inquiry proposed 3 causes: storm, collision with uncharted rock, and structural defect.
None of the three was confirmed.
The wreck of HMS Wasp was never located on the seabed. Without the hull, without a fracture pattern or a specific impact point, the physical evidence required to choose between the three explanations did not exist. The Times covered the loss in October 1887. The National Archives at Kew contain the Admiralty file, the ADM records of the inquiry. The inquiry produced a report. The report produced no conclusion. 3 causes proposed, but none of the physical evidence pointed decisively to any one of them. Therefore, the official record was closed, with the cause listed as undetermined. Undetermined, a word that means the Navy tried and failed to find an answer. A word that has sat in that file for over 130 years, unchanged, because nothing has ever emerged to change it. What made the Wasp's loss harder to dismiss was the pattern it completed. Before the Wasp, 3 other Royal Navy vessels had experienced casualties in the waters around Tory Island: HMS Dorado, HMS Douro, and HMS Doris. Not all were total losses, but all had been damaged or involved in incidents in that specific stretch of coastline. 4 Royal Navy vessels, the same geographic zone, all within a period of years. The Admiralty knew about the previous incidents when the Wasp was assigned to those waters. The Wasp went anyway.
Was this the result of uncharted hazards, rock formations, current patterns, weather systems funneled by the coastline's geography in ways that the charts of that era had never captured? The Admiralty's charts for that coast were not comprehensive. Uncharted rock is a known cause of Victorian-era naval losses. Or was it something about the particular combination of currents, rock, and weather that made those waters specifically lethal to vessels of the Wasp's type and size? The Admiralty knew the waters were dangerous. They sent the Wasp there anyway. When the Wasp did not return, the pattern had been completed, but not explained. Tory Island has been inhabited since the Neolithic period. The community there has outlasted empires, survived isolation, and maintained its own cultural identity for thousands of years. The people of Tory Island have their own account of what happened to the British naval vessels that came to grief in their waters. The island's priest, the legend attached to the story does not give a single definitive name, but the tradition is consistent, was said to have cursed English ships operating in those waters. The curse passed through generations of island oral history. 4 ships damaged or lost before the Wasp as the culmination. John de Courcy Ireland documented the maritime losses around Tory Island in his historical work on Irish sea fisheries. The pattern he recorded was real, whatever its cause. 52 men. Their names are in the Admiralty records. Their graves were never marked because their bodies were never recovered. Tory Island remembered them in its own way. The Royal Navy closed the file. The official record says, cause undetermined. No subsequent Royal Navy hydrographic survey of the specific hazards around Tory Island was published in a form that connected those hazards to the 4 previous incidents. The waters were known to be difficult. The mechanism that made them specifically lethal to 4 vessels was never formally established. The wreck of HMS Wasp has never been found and positively identified on the seabed. It lies somewhere off that coastline, at a depth that modern technology could reach without difficulty. 4 British warships, one stretch of coastline. The same absence of explanation each time.
At what point does a pattern stop being coincidence and become a question that demands a different kind of answer?
The Admiralty never asked that question with enough persistence to find out. The file remained closed. Tory Island remained isolated, and the waters around it remained what they had always been. 4 Royal Navy ships lost in the same waters, and the Admiralty's files on each one closed without a confirmed cause. The next case is different. The cause was found. The chain of failures was reconstructed, step by step, pipe joint by pipe joint. The Navy knew exactly what had gone wrong, and that knowledge, bought at the price of 129 lives, would permanently change how every submarine on Earth was built.
On April 10, 1963, USS Thresher left Portsmouth Naval Shipyard for a deep dive test, the final step in her post-refit certification before returning to operational deployment. She was a nuclear attack submarine, SSN 593, commissioned in 1961. She was among the most advanced submarines the United States Navy had ever put in the water. Faster, deeper, quieter than anything that had come before. 129 people were aboard. Navy crew, officers, and a number of civilian engineers from Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, the men who had performed the 9-month refit and were present to verify their own work under operational conditions. The Thresher had already completed her shakedown after the refit. This test was a certification dive, the kind of routine procedure that confirms readiness before a submarine returns to service.
It was supposed to be the last administrative step before she was cleared for deployment. It would certify something else entirely. The surface escort was USS Skylark, a submarine rescue vessel assigned to maintain position directly above Thresher throughout the dive and to serve as the communication link between the submarine and the surface. The two vessels maintained contact through an underwater telephone, a hydroacoustic communication system that allowed voice transmission between the submerged submarine and the ship above. Thresher would check in at regular intervals as she descended. Skylark would confirm receipt. The civilian technicians aboard Thresher were there as observers and verifiers, engineers who had personally worked on the pipe joints, the ballast systems, the propulsion equipment during the refit. They had the most detailed knowledge of the submarine's condition of anyone on either vessel. The Skylark's underwater telephone operator would spend the rest of his life with the sounds he heard that morning. He would testify about them in front of the court of inquiry. What he described would become central to everything that followed.
Thresher had been in refit at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard for 9 months, a standard deep overhaul that included hundreds of pipe fittings, joints, and seawater system components throughout the hull.
The technique used for many of those joints was silver brazing, a method of fusing pipe connections using a silver-based alloy. It was standard practice. It had been used on naval vessels for decades. But silver-brazed joints have a known characteristic. Under sustained high pressure, in cold water, a joint that passed inspection at the surface could fail at depth. The test dive was planned to approach Thresher's maximum operating depth, approximately 400 meters. That was the point at which the joints would be under the maximum stress the refit was supposed to have prepared them for. 9 months of maintenance. Hundreds of joints. One of them had not held. Thresher descended into the Atlantic on a clear April morning, and the Skylark took up position above her. At approximately 9:13 in the morning, Thresher sent a message to Skylark. She was experiencing minor difficulties. Minor difficulties. In submarine terminology, that is not a casual phrase. It is a controlled report of a developing problem. Serious enough to report, not yet serious enough to declare an emergency. Minutes later, a second transmission. Thresher was attempting to blow. The procedure for forcing high-pressure air into the ballast tanks to drive the submarine rapidly upward toward the surface. An emergency ascent. Then, Skylark's operator heard something through the underwater telephone that was not a voice. Rushing water. The sound of a flooded compartment communicating through the hull and into the acoustic system. Then, a sound that the operator described as the noise of a ship breaking apart under pressure. Then, silence. The entire sequence, from minor difficulties to silence, lasted fewer than 10 minutes. Thresher had attempted to blow, but the ballast system was too slow, or partially obstructed, or the flooding was too fast for the blow to compensate. Therefore, the submarine continued to descend, past test depth, past the point of no return, past the depth at which the hull could maintain its integrity. 129 people, 10 minutes, no recovery. The debris field was found at 2,400 meters, 6 times deeper than Thresher's test depth. Survey vessels, including the Bathyscaphe Trieste, located the field in the weeks following the loss. What they found was not a wreck. It was a scatter pattern, twisted sections of hull plate, insulation material compressed into new shapes by pressure, small personal items that had survived the implosion and drifted down. A rubber glove, a shoe, the kind of objects that do not compress. The U.S. Navy's SOSS network, the undersea hydrophone array maintained across the Atlantic, had recorded the acoustic signature of Thresher's implosion in real time. The recording established the time and location of the loss to a precision that visual search alone could not have achieved. USS Thresher was designated her crew's final resting place. No recovery of human remains was possible at 2,400 meters with the technology of 1963. The 129 men aboard remain on the seafloor of the North Atlantic. The debris field is their grave. The SOUS recording is their epitaph. The Court of Inquiry convened immediately and reconstructed the failure chain from the physical evidence, the acoustic record, and the final transmissions. The theory, supported by the evidence, ran as follows. A silver brazed pipe joint in the engine room seawater system failed under the pressure of the deep dive test. The joint had passed inspection at the surface. At depth, under sustained cold water pressure, it gave way. Seawater sprayed into the engine room under high pressure. Seawater contacted electrical systems and panels. The nuclear reactor's automatic safety system, the scram mechanism, detected the electrical anomaly and shut the reactor down. Automatically, by design, exactly as it was built to do. The reactor shutdown was not a failure. It was a success. The safety system worked perfectly. But the reactor was also the source of Thresher's propulsion. With the reactor scrammed and the flooding ongoing, the submarine had no power to drive upward. The emergency blow was initiated, but the high-pressure air system was not fast enough, or was partially obstructed by ice forming in the lines as cold seawater met the expanding air. Thresher continued to sink. Below test depth, below crush depth, the hull failed.
A safety system designed to prevent one catastrophe had, in combination with the flooding, created another. How do you engineer against that?
The answer became SubSafe.
The U.S. Navy initiated the SubSafe program directly following the loss of Thresher. Every submarine hull fitting, pipe joint, and seawater penetration in the fleet was recertified or replaced. New material standards, new inspection protocols, new requirements for emergency ballast blow capacity, enough to overcome a flooded compartment at depth.
The program cost hundreds of millions of dollars across the entire fleet. It took years to implement fully.
Since SubSafe full implementation, no U.S. Navy submarine has been lost to flooding or pressure system failure. USS Scorpion was lost in 1968. She had not completed SubSafe recertification at the time of her loss.
Every other SubSafe certified U.S. submarine for over 60 years has come home. 129 men died because a pipe joint failed. Every submarine hull certified since April 10, 1963, carries that number in its engineering standards. The knowledge was bought, the price was absolute, and it has not been wasted.
4 cases, 4 different ways the evidence runs out, or doesn't run out at all, which turns out to be its own kind of problem. In the Gulf of Bothnia, the evidence is sitting at 87 meters. It is accessible. It could be sampled, mapped, and analyzed by any university with a research vessel and a dive permit. The samples exist. The sonar data exists. The answer exists somewhere in that material. But the people who control access have declined to share it, and so the circle sits there, perfectly round, unexplained, 60 meters across.
In the Atlantic north of the Bahamas, the evidence was 7 words. Danger like dagger now. Come quick. Every man who knew what those words meant died before the Homeric arrived. The translation may have been wrong. The original message is gone.
Off Tory Island, the evidence was scattered wreckage and a pattern. 4 Royal Navy ships, 1 stretch of coastline, cause undetermined each time. The Admiralty closed the files. The files are still closed.
And in the North Atlantic, 2,400 meters down, the evidence was a pipe joint. A joint that passed inspection. A joint that failed at depth, in cold water. Under pressure, it had been certified to withstand. 3 of these cases have no answer. One has an answer that cost 129 lives to produce.
The question the Baltic, the Raifuku Maru, and HMS Wasp still carry is not what happened. It is whether anyone will ever care enough to find out.